Welcome, wildflowers. How are you? I think it's time that we have a little bit of a conversation. Obviously, I did not induce this. I awoke last week to discover that the perils of demon sex are now a national conversation. And for the past several weeks, I've actually wanted to talk about a similar theme. And I think this is a good way to begin. Your greatest power is what you focus on. Now, look, this is not an absolute power. You are in a body in a different world, in a world that you're not running. And despite the 1900,000 YouTube videos that you can watch that will tell you to focus on the world you want and make it real, the limitations on this process are something I encourage you to embrace. They're healthy. Nobody should even begin to want to have that kind of power because we live in a shared universe and we live in a shared planet and we live in communities that can't afford to have certain individuals running roughshod over everybody else. It's healthy to develop yourself in a way that is harmonious with others. And that has everything to do with accepting, embracing limitations. And when we step beyond those limitations, there's a lot. There's a lot. And not only does it influence everyone else you know, every other human being you know, but it becomes sort of a vote within yourself of what you're trying to pay attention to. Now, again, it's not absolute. You will be pulled in directions that you don't want to go, and you will be restrained from directions that you probably shouldn't try to go, even if you keep trying. And I'm telling you, you'll live a better life and it'll all work much more in a much healthier way if you begin with the presumption that the world has your best interest at heart. And if you work with the resistances and the very least learn about them, you're going to do better. All right, get into it. Shocker, be present. I don't know how many mainstreamy people are listening to this at the moment. I would love it if a lot of you did. Aliens are very real. Now, look, you're not going to be able to stay aware for very long beyond the limits of normal mainstream reality unless you start with a much healthier perspective on what's real. You are an alien. Okay? Like, you have to abandon this root lie that we're here by ourselves. We evolved for billions of years. There's maybe nobody else in the universe. It's all black, dead rocks, blah, blah, blah. It's all bullshit. It's a tough thing. It's a tough sell. I get it, to someone who's still coming out of this normal reality, but it's a lie. So embracing the truth, although it's scary, although it's challenging, is a lot healthier for you because you no longer have to invest in a lie. Base level, angels are safer than aliens to believe in. Now, from a grand picture, angels are simply beings that are very committed to the earth. They've been here a long time. They'll be here. They've been here before you. They're going to be here after you. They're committed to shepherding this experience, this cycle of human history. And they live longer lifespans. They live in longer cycles than you do, thousands of years. And they do live and die. Their incarnation cycles end. They go through a kind of death that you can't fathom from within the perspective of just a human life. And they're very present. So the simple truth is that once you begin to dissolve or figure out a way to slip past the barriers, the boundaries of the normal reality that pretends all this stuff doesn't exist, go to an angel. Do it again and again and again. Be a little duckling. Be a little toddler holding the skirt tails of an angel. Beg them for attention. Return to them constantly. It is much healthier than simply wandering around randomly connecting to whatever. Now look, trees have consciousness. When you tap into the consciousness of a tree, you're tapping into the consciousness of that species of tree in the region. It's more of a group mind. They're intertwined. So don't have a false understanding like every individual tree is an individual. However, you will be able to experience them that way because they will manifest that way for you once you learn to sense them. There are spirits, elemental spirits to the rivers, to the air. There are spirits of consciousness to diseases. And there are definitely spirits of deeply profound beauty that will seduce you past the limits that you know. And the simple, simple truth is that this is a consensual reality, and as much as it can be. So if you agree, you may get there. However, if you don't remember, you're out, you're angel. It's a very dangerous experience. And honestly, despite a lot of exploring, I can't say that I've encountered a ton of value in wandering around elemental levels, spirit, fairy levels. It's confusing. It's out of touch with humanity. They stay with you, and in some cases, you can tap into consciousness that wants to keep pulling you back, making it more difficult for you to be present and love the people that you love. And at the end of the day, that is the lesson that ends up arriving: is learn to love the people you love. In my youth, when I began such things, that sounded boring. Now I get it. And whatever extent to which you have to throw yourself into the ephemeral worlds and dissolve what you know and reject what you know and fight with it, do what you got to do. But I encourage you to trust that every teacher that I've trusted, and from my own depth of experience, at the end of long cycles of spiritual exploration, you're going to want to love better in your home, with your parents, with your spouse or your friends or your children. And the depth of beauty to such love enhances once you know and trust and can transcend the boundaries of what you used to know as normal. Aliens, which I prefer to contemplate as voyeurs, are also real. And there are many different kinds, and I encourage you not to get lost in it. That's the only lesson that I'm going to give you after 20 years of exploring this shit. I've engaged intensely with multiple alien species. It is moderately exciting. At times it has been utterly terrifying. And at the end of the day, look, some of them have been benevolent. Some of them have been sort of neutral. Some of them have helped me cope with pain and seemingly digest sort of spiritual extremes. They've kind of put me in check and pushed me back. Nonetheless, they're watching. Okay, they're watching. They are watching something happening here. And their level of investment is never equivalent to someone who is incarnated here. What I learned over time is that as I practiced, and I embedded in my spiritual practices angels that I trusted. As I practiced connecting to them, meditating with them, praying, learning to listen to them, be present with them, as I got into more obscure spiritual extremes, I could pray, help me, help me, help me. I'm in over my head. I'm scared. It always pulled me out. But they didn't pull me out particularly frequently until I did that. Now, on several occasions, they did. And the irony and the beauty is that that was sort of an introduction to the fact that they loved me. Bridget, fire goddess of Ireland, Mary Magdalene, both pulled me out of extremes that I got myself into without me asking for their help. But after that, when I encountered similar spiritual extremes, they kind of were like, and waited until I asked for help. And then when I asked for help, they were there. And I can't tell you enough, if you haven't explored much yet, or if you have explored a ton, potentially using psychedelics, you'll understand that it's quite possible to, you can sit here watching this video and register that it's important to you to ask for help, but you have to do more than that in order to remember. You could get into some serious intensities in which your consciousness, as you know it, as you know yourself now, isn't present. You have to do work to extend your intentions beyond this moment and to connect with aspects of yourself, with the continuity of your consciousness into different fields of existence. Because it is perfectly normal to get way beyond normal, completely out of touch with material reality, where your attention is very present on another plane of existence. You might be numb, even drooling, asleep, in a trance in your human body, totally disconnected from your awareness here and very present somewhere else. Your consciousness, you have to do work to learn to carry your awareness, your intelligence, your intuitive trust in spiritual guidance into those spaces. You have to work to do that. And I can't encourage you to do that work enough. A spiritual practice that you commit to weekly, mostly daily, in which you commit to several guides and angels, in which you focus your intentions, in which you reinforce what you trust and why, is an investment that you carry with you into these spaces. So I imagine anyone who's watching this does have a lot of curiosity as a psychic explorer. And I'm not telling you not to explore. I wouldn't be me if I hadn't. But I will tell you that I explore a lot less than I used to. I found so many things that I love about my life here and now. And so many of the lessons that I have to share with you here on YouTube, on the channel, are this is it. This is what I want to be doing. This is what I want to be focusing. And by investing my presence in these dynamics and reaching out to people who are curious in these ways, this is what is fulfillment to me. I hope that these tools can be useful to you. I have not encountered an alien or an earthly spirit that's more interesting or more loving than Jesus or Mary or Bridget or Thoth or Shiva or Michael. Go ahead, learn, focus, explore, but their presences they have a continuity for a reason. There's a reason you actually know who they are, despite the fact that the modern contemporary American world doesn't fully believe in them. They're still in the consciousness. They haven't disappeared. And when you get yourself beyond what you've known as normal, that's who you can trust the most. And I cannot encourage you enough to develop that kind of relationship where you will have their trust and support. Now, there's also a whole nother layer I'd like to discuss with you, and that is the contemporary story. See, I think it's fairly tempting to believe that there is a normal that is normal for most people. But if you ask most people, somewhere upward of 70% of the individuals in American culture believe in angels. So that actually surprised me. I really honestly thought it would be much less than that when I initially heard the figure. And what I found as I explored more, and I have put myself into multiple communities that are very different than the ones I grew up in. And just within American society, there's a wide range of realities. Now, we share these basic, there are gas stations everywhere and strip malls and even certain chain stores all over the place, and people mostly shop at them and such. So we have a common denominator, which is quite helpful. But the reality is different communities, different towns, different communities within cities have entirely different awareness, consciousness, focus. And there are plenty of beings who are not nearly in their bodies. They're sharing a conscious presence that is disembodied. They're operating their bodies very much by remote control. And this is a lot of people. And some of them have invested themselves in such a way, and I have to tell you, I've found this to be much more true in Republican circles, where they're aware on a level that it kind of freaks me out. Like, I remember I had a meditation one night and I ended up in some kind of Republican gathering, which really it weirded me out. Like, I was uncomfortable. I'm like, what the hell am I doing here? And I tried to be present. Like, it was a consciousness gathering. All right. We're talking very present in the mind. They were aware they'd invited a lot of people. I'm like, how the hell did I get up here? And the next day or so, a couple days later, someone on Facebook called me out, referring to gathering and saying, I saw you there. I know you were there. That level of presence that's something else. And it's very uncomfortable in ways that, it's all the more reason to learn to be aware of what you love, who you love, how you love, and to be consistent and investing your love in a way that you don't end up in places that you're not just in over your head, you're in a consciousness that you don't want to be a part of. And I have to tell you, sexuality has a lot to do with that. The irony of this conversation last week is that of all the things that were mentioned by this doctor who was supporting the fraudulent malaria drug that does not, it's actively detrimental for coronavirus treatment. So, and I'm talking to an epidemiologist who I grew up with, who is my cousin, who's actually a pharmaceutical executive for a nonprofit division studying vaccines for COVID. And she's absolutely adamant. All the peer-reviewed studies I trust indicate that it is worse than the control group. So this is fraudulent bullshit being foisted on us, and it's being foisted on us for one specific reason. Many conservative, quote unquote, conservative Republican circles are much more aware that the power of our faith helps to shape reality. In fact, this individual currently occupying our White House should not be overlooked for his extraordinary gift at knowing this. He just tries to make shit real. And by forcing it into presence, he almost believes it himself. And he gets a lot of other people believing in it. And he knows that by generating a lot of attention, it creates a presence. And that presence has truth to it, even if that truth defies the real truth, the real facts, the facts that have a deeper current of rootedness, groundedness than whatever it is that he's made up. So by getting a lot of people to believe that something works, it does empower it in a placebo effect way. It's an active placebo. It's an active groupthink placebo. And it ends up being it has an influence. It's just unfortunately put on the wrong substance. But what they're trying to do is use their power of belief in a society that doesn't really recognize how powerful belief can be in these ways. So they chose the wrong thing to put that shit on. And this interesting doctor that they used to back up also has been mocked mercilessly for advocating against masturbation because it allows in demons. It does. Really. Now, point in fact, if you learn to focus yourself, you probably won't let in demons. And I'm not going to be too present with you in this because this is your story. This is your story with love. But I do encourage you to get good with angels that you trust to help focus your guidance. Because if you use your sexuality in a haphazard way, you tune yourself. Sexuality is one of the most dramatic and simple ways to retune yourself. If you retune yourself thoroughly, just in relation to an attraction, you don't pay attention to what you're attracted to. You don't pay attention. You don't measure who this person is, why their vibe attracts you, what is underneath the surface. You can get yourself seriously caught up in some very unhealthy vibes. Now, for that reason, I actually stopped using porn 20 years ago, during my spiritual awakening. And I didn't do it because it was wrong. I did it because I had the profound spiritual guidance that it's not healthy to weave my sexuality, to give my sexuality to people who don't love me. If someone doesn't love me and I'm imagining being sexual with them, that's a prayer. That's a powerful prayer. And it's a form of prayer that undermines my ability to attract someone I love. It really does. So if you're not praying with people who love you, if you're not praying with people who are loving with their sexuality, if you're not imagining sexuality with love present, that's what you're creating. You're creating sex without love. And that absolutely can open the door to demonic presences. Now, when I say demonic, that could refer to a wide range of beings. But on the point in fact, beings that don't love, beings that are wounded, beings that are trying to use sex to distract themselves, to create presence that avoids pain. Now, you can use sex in a healing way with people you love, but if you're doing that with beings that you don't know, that all sorts of layers of toxicity and dominance could be a part of, you reap what you sow. It's not so good. It really is better to learn to abstain and restrain until you focus in a way that you love. Now, what I ended up doing was I researched and found sexual videos from couples, from people who really loved each other. And that was a window out for me. It was a path away from potentially hellacious connections, sexual connections without love. And I cannot encourage you enough to stay away from them. Marriage or committed relationship absolutely is one of the safest ways to stay focused. And you can totally take that into levels of intensity that are awesome, that are really awesome. And again, it doesn't have to be marriage. I don't know if you know the news, but this woman said, only use sex with marriage. Don't masturbate ever because it brings in the demons. A commitment is really what makes this work. A commitment creates a channel of love, of loving life force, where your presences are focused on each other and reinforce each other in a way that, prevents random confusion from getting in there. And, even more specifically, consensual engagements. So you form a consensual connection and you know who this other person is on a certain level, and you can generate trust. This can be very loving. It doesn't mean you have to commit to them for the rest of your life, but do be conscious about how you share yourself in these ways. Because at the end of the day, you can get past the boundaries of what you've known as normal. You can get past them in a remarkable range of ways. And once you do, fear reinforces itself. You'll get afraid, you'll get terrified. And as you feel that terror, it reinforces the terror. And in order to transform it, you need to have a faith that you carry with you. And that faith is something you can cultivate when you are fine. In fact, it's something you need to cultivate when you are fine, when everything's normal, when things are peaceful, and you have the time to invest in a spiritual practice of 20 minutes. Simply include some basic elements like a simple one-sentence prayer to an angel you trust. Keep that happening several times a week, and you will know, you will remember, you will reach out for help to these beings, and you'll learn to hear them. You'll learn they'll increasingly be present, send you dreams, send you messages that you can learn to know are from them. The extraordinary love that you can gain in this way is it's immeasurable. It's awesome. And they'll introduce you to spiritual guides that are your own. Mary, I went to my wife. Her mother grew up near Magdala in Israel. And I went there, and we went to Magdala, where Mary Magdalene is from. And they're uncovering the site in the past decade. And they have what's called a mikveh. It's a sacred pool that was there. And I just stared at this mikveh. I was entranced. And that night, I remembered the mikveh, and I was pulled into it spiritually. And the intensity was beyond belief. It was just so unbelievably present. And as I emerged from that mikveh, actually, as I was in the depths of feeling immersed in the spiritual vibration, like a baptism, I held my name as Kaya, which I've known as my spiritual name, my higher self, my soul in this lifetime invested in this body. And I emerged out of that energy, cleansed and transformed. And in that, I was introduced to both myself as Kaya and my spiritual guide as Kaya, a being who has taken the same name. And I was called to recognize that this is ordained, blessed by Mary. So in my investment, and I had for years invested in a trust with Mary, she was able to bless me with the sense that I had a personal guide who's with me, who's present, who I could converse with, but who's part of her order, who's part of her embrace, her divine spiritual presence. So there's a safety, there's a networking, there's a presence that's shared, has roots, deep roots in human history, and commits me to this in a way that prevents me from being susceptible to demonic confusions, to voyeuristic presences. Because the fact of the matter is, I don't know if do you hear voices? Because once you start learning to hear voices, you can tune into a lot of things. I don't know if it works this way for everybody. Some people just sort of open up on a particular vibe. But when I opened up, it was for a while, it was anything I focused on. I could get some interpretation of what was going on for them. For the animals that I focused on, for the trees, for anything and anyone. I could focus on a person and I would get some interpretation of what their consciousness was doing. And it was verbal. It's confusing. It was overwhelming. By focusing and learning to invest yourself, you can navigate through that and be useful. Make your consciousness useful. Don't just be a loose, not knowing where you're going, because you honestly won't get very far. And you can get really addicted to the extremes. You can get so excited that you'll end up in a conversation that's present. You know that you're talking to another being. For years, I would be so enthralled by that I didn't pay attention to the fact that because I still lived in doubt, because I still wasn't fully embracing how present other spiritual consciousnesses are, every time I ended up in conversation with them, I was just so excited that I couldn't measure whether this was a healthy conversation. Just because you're talking to something spiritually doesn't mean it has your best interests at heart. You have to ask. You have to learn to develop the tools to recognize what other influence are they having on you. Because when I learned to transcend those boundaries, I was totally out of tune with my body. I would be there with my consciousness, but I couldn't pay attention to the fact that I was getting sapped. I was getting spiritually sapped. There's something very present and strong and vibrant about living in a human body, and disembodied beings, ghosts, or just spirits that aren't in a body. Maybe they've never been in a body, but they're wandering around. They like getting your attention. Your attention is valuable. It's rich. They drink that shit. And it becomes more than voyeuristic. It's up to you to break it. It's up to you to focus yourself. It's up to you to not even be afraid anymore, because you recognize your base level power in both shifting your attention and asking for help. I hope that I have made the importance of these choices and the potential for connecting in many different ways. And I hope I've made these things clear. And I hope this helps illuminate both the dangers and the potential, because chances are there's specific reasons you're being drawn deeper. There are subtle worlds waiting for you that you need to learn about. There are memories, there is guidance. And in order to navigate that well, it's really helpful to have some basic tools available to bring you back to your center. If you can't say no, you can't say yes. If you're just haphazardly getting dragged around, you can't ever really be present and trust the process, because you'll be scared. You'll be overwhelmed. You'll be disempowered as you shift. I pray for you the base level trust in love and in yourself, that you can explore in every way that is healthy for you, and you can come back with blessings for all of us. Thanks for being here. Please get in touch if you're interested in a spiritual session. I can do a 1-session evaluation with you to help you identify your priorities for healing and growth. And we can do ongoing work that coaches and teaches you in spiritual exercises and how to develop and use your awareness of a spiritual reality to live a better life. Please share this with your friends. Subscribe if you've not already done so, and click the little bell so you'll get notified when I come on live or when I upload a new video. Much love be with you and your family.